Welcome to Lingua Latina Tutorials with Mr. K, Pensum D. This video explains the new grammar and syntax found in Chapter 24 of the Lingua Latina per se Illustrata series. It is meant to accompany the Latina Disco text available from Focus Bookstore and the Pensum D worksheets available from 50%latin.blogspot.com or christianlanguage.com. In the text, if you will go with me to line 12, we have our first new feature. We have At subito silentium clamore et strepitu maximo rumpetur. We'll stop there because the feature here is at the beginning of the sentence. But suddenly, the silence is broken by a shout and by a really big sound. And we have here subito, which is an adverb. You see in the margin here listed as an adverb. We've seen before adverbs that have been formed with a long E, like rectus aum, the adjective forming its adverb recte, correctly. But here we see an adverb that ends in O, a long O, subito, suddenly. In this chapter there are a couple other adverbs like that. They're really common adverbs. Adverbs like certo, certainly, and primo, at first. Just recognize that when these come up, you'll see in the margin that don't mistake them for first person singular verb ending or for dative or an ablative ending in the second declension or something like that. Okay, so the next new feature is in line 24. So let's go ahead to 24, and here we have puer pedem sibi dolera ait, valde mihi dolet pes, etc. So the boy, this is Sira speaking, she says, the boy says that his foot is hurting him. Now sibi here is a reflexive pronoun. He's saying that the subject here is he. He says that his foot is hurting him. When it reflects back on the subject, here sibi is the dative singular, masculine. It's actually a common. It's a common gender. It goes with whatever it's referring back to, whatever that gender happens to be in here. It's referring back to Marcus. I mean Quintus who's hurt. So it's dative going with dolera. It hurts him. And if we were going to decline this fully, the accusative is se, se, as you see in the margin here. The genitive is sui, of himself. Dative is sibi, to or for himself. And the ablative is also se, just like the accusative, by, with, in, on, from himself. That these forms roughly parallel your reflexive forms of tui or te, tui, tibi, te, those forms for tu, the reflexive form of tu, and also for me, the reflexive form for myself. In line 30, we have another new feature. So we'll start with antequam de arbore cecidi pares erant, nunc pes dexter major est pede laevo. So before I fell from the tree, they were equal. Let's talk about his feet. Now, my right foot is bigger than my left foot. Here we have pede laevo in the ablative case. Pes is a masculine noun, pes pedis. And why is this in the ablative case? With a comparative adjective like major, bigger, is bigger than my left foot. If you there are two ways to do the comparison. One is to use quam, as you see in the margin here, quam pes laevus. If you use quam, then you get a nominative right afterward. Bigger than my left foot is, as if this were the subject of its own clause, then pes laevus est. But if you do not use quam, you get an ablative of comparison. And so the ablative all by itself, after a comparison word, comparative adjective, can mean than my left foot. The next new feature is in line 40. And we have Quintus saying to Sira, consolare me, Sira, consolare me. Consolare is, if you can see in the margin, comes from a deponent verb. Remember, deponents have set aside their active forms, so they most frequently they show up as passive in form but active in meaning. So consolari means to comfort. It's the passive infinitive in form but active in meaning, to comfort. Just like loqui, to speak, is passive in form but active in meaning. So what this note is telling us is that the imperative of these deponents looks like the active infinitive. So this looks like an active to console, but is actually the imperative singular commanding console me. Same thing for loqui. If we were going to do the imperative of speak or speak with me, loquere mecum, speak with me. You're going to learn more about that in the next chapter. So just quick review, we're going to see many forms of deponents in this chapter. So for consolari, because it's the deponent, it's only going to have two principal parts, consolari and consolatum esse. And if we were going to, the only time that this would ever have active forms, this looks like an active form, the imperative, even though it's just it's an irregular form. But the present active and the future active participles, consolans, comforting, and consolaturus, about to comfort, those are the only two active forms that the deponents will have. In line 47, we have our next new feature, and it is here with passus est. Sira says, et si valet, certe tergi dolores passus est. Sira says, even if he's well, certainly he has suffered pain of the back, or he's suffered pain in his back, we would say. Passus est, we see in the margin, comes from pati passum esse, so we know this is a deponent verb, because it only has these two principal parts, meaning pati, to suffer, and passum esse, to have suffered. Notice it's not passive, it's not to be suffered and to have been suffered, it's active, to suffer and to have suffered. And the reason that we only have two here is because we don't have, there's no perfect active principal part with no perfect active endings and no perfect active stem, because there's no active forms, and so we're missing that principal part. This particular verb, passus est, he endured or he suffered, is a third person singular. You can tell that from est. And it is a perfect deponent indicative. So rather than active or passive, this form is deponent in voice. The next new feature is on line 58. And we have Quintus, who says, quomodo medus qui vix umquam Romae fuit, puellam Romanam noscera potuit. So how was Medus, who has barely been in Rome, how was he able to get to know a Roman girl? And then we have, so the new form here is noskara, which in its present form, noskara means to get to know. It has kind of a present progressive sense. But in its perfect form, and we see in the margin here, noskara novisse, novisse, which should mean to have known, doesn't actually mean that. It actually means to know. It has a present sense. So noskara has a present progressive, to get to know sense. Novisse has just a simple present sense, to know. And you'll see that in this example here, where Sira says, Nescio quomodo, sed certoscio aliquam feminam novisse, nam saipade ea locutus est. So Sira says, I don't know how, but certainly I know that he knows. Okay, we're an indirect statement. I know that he knows, or he knows some girl, some woman, for often he has spoken about her. Okay, the next new feature is in also in line 60 here with locutus est. You heard me translate it as for he has often spoken about her, has spoken. We see in the margin that loqui locutum esse, another deponent. Loqui, to speak, locutum esse, to have spoken. Again, active meanings from passive forms. And so this is just in form third person singular, perfect, indicative, deponent in voice. In line 66, we have a new tense, and to start the sentence we need to go up to nuper. Nuper Marcus solus redeit, sed pater filium suum redeuntem scis vix cognovit, neque eum osculatus est, ut solet, nam Marcus non modo humidus erat, quod per imbrum ambulaverat, there's our new form, sed etiam sordidus atque cruentus, quod humi jacuerat, et a sexto pulsatus erat. Okay, we have several new forms in this section that I'm going to point out. The first is ambulaverat. This is a third person singular, pluperfect indicative active verb. The pluperfect is the fifth of the 6 tenses that you're going to be learning. We only have one more tense to learn, and that's the future perfect. And so the pluperfect means more than perfect. The perfect means something has been done. The pluperfect means it's been done even more. So it's something that's happened in the past before something else in the past. So here we have Marcus who was wet, but something in the past happened before to make him get wet, and that is because he had walked. We use the helping verb had with our English verb to show the pluperfect in English. The way that this is formed is we take our perfect stem, and the 3 principal parts of ambulara are ambulara, ambulavisse, and ambulatum esse. So we go to our second part, our perfect stem, ambulavisse, and we see that ambulav or ambulau is our stem. And to that, instead of adding e isti et imus istis erunt like we did for the perfect, we add eram, eras, erat, eramus, eratus, erant, our imperfect form of sum. And so to conjugate ambulara in the pluperfect, we would have ambulaveram, ambulaveras, ambulaverat, ambulaweramus, ambulaweratis, ambulawerant, which would translate as I had walked, you had walked, he, she, it had walked, etc. So this is the pluperfect. We have another example here with jacuerat. Now that jacuerat is the same person, number, tense, mood, and voice as ambulaverat. It is third person singular, pluperfect active, or pluperfect indicative active. Its principal parts, though, come from jacera, to lie down, yakera, yakuise, to have lied down, and yakitum esse, to have been lain down, or laid down. And the another very similar verb that you should distinguish from this is the verb to throw, which is an I stem verb, so it's yakio, yakara, yekise, yakdamese, which would mean yakara to throw, yekise to have thrown, yakdam esse to have been thrown. And the stems for each of them to compare, the present stem for to lie down is yakke with a short e. The present stem for yakara to throw is yakke with an I. The perfect stem of to lie down, yakera, is yaku from yakuise, yaku. The perfect stem for to throw is yek, I-E-C, from yekisse, to have thrown. And then the supine stem for yakera, to lie down, is yakit, I-A-C-I-T, from yakitum esse. And for to throw, the supine is yakt, I-A-C-T, from yaktum esse. So if you do know the three principal parts, even verbs that look very similar, you'll be able to distinguish them in context, because you'll know what their stems are. Line 67, we already saw pulsatus erat. This is the passive form of the tense that we learned here with ambulaverat. Ambulaverat, he had walked. Pulsatus erat, he had been hit. He had been punched. Pulsatus erat. How do you form this third person singular pluperfect indicative passive? You form it by taking our supine, which is pulsatus aum, from pulsara, and we add eram, eras, erat, eramus, eratus, erant. We add our imperfect of sum as a separate word, not as an ending, as we had with ambulaverat. So, if we were going to conjugate fully pulsatus erat, we would have pulsatus aum, eram, eras, erat, pulsati aya, eramus, eratus, erant. The next new feature is in line 101. And so here we are with tum Marcus qui primo omnia negaverat, se mentitum esse Passos est, which means then Marcus, who at first had denied everything, admitted that he lied. So mentitum esse, this is the first time you've seen a deponent like mentiri, to lie. The first time we've seen it in its what looks like a perfect passive infinitive, to have been somethinged, but instead what we get is an active translation. To have lied would be the translation that we'd see if it weren't an indirect statement, but since it's an indirect statement, he admitted that he lied. We get mentitum esse. So knowing that this is a deponent helps you to translate this correctly in context as a perfect infinitive deponent. And the last new feature is in line 134, and that is in the Grammatica section. We have here that eri magister me laudavit quia bonus discipulus fueram. So yesterday the teacher praised me because I had been a good student. Here we have a first person singular, pluperfect, indicative active from sum esse fui futurus. Sum esse fuisse futurus. Es futurum esse. So fueram, the way we get this form is we go to the perfect stem, which is fuisse. Take off the isse and you get fu, and we add imperfect of sum, eram, eras, erat, eramus, eratus, erant. So if you know the stem, this form is regular, even though sum as a verb is an irregular verb. And those are all the new features for chapter 24. Thank you for listening.